Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon with many of our turf friends that we've met over the past 35 plus years.
Hi, everybody. This is my first on-location podcast, and I thought I'd do it semi-locally with one of my good friends in the industry, Ryan Kuster. Did I say that right, Ryan?
Yes, you did.
Kuster, okay. And he's with Ag Enterprises, and they build sprayers. They do a lot of work in a lot of different industries. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. I actually have somebody to look at this time, so those of you that are listening and not watching, which is most of you, we're sitting in a conference room at the world headquarters for Ag Enterprise. I'm excited to be here. We go back quite a ways. We've done some work together and built some sprayers, but I've just kind of watched these guys as a company really grow and continue to support the turf and landscape industry to a higher degree every year. I'm excited to have you on. We've got a good list of questions, and the technology you guys are bringing to the industry, I think, is pretty exciting. So let's get started with just a little bit of your background, like how you came to where you are, and what your position is here at Ag Enterprise,
Sure.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm. I'm Eastern Washington farm kid.
Okay.
I'd much rather be out in the field working on something
Figured.
my whole life than sitting in a classroom somewhere. But
Are you still farming a little bit?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm just helping out with everybody else out there. But I graduated from Washington State University quite a few years back.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs, with an ag technology and management degree.
Okay.
Business administration minor. Growing up on the farm, my family used to joke around a lot about if there was ever anybody that could figure out how to combine computers and farming, that would be my career. And here I am living the dream.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, I graduated from WSU and then went to work on a irrigated dryland farm in Eastern Washington for 11 years, and then had the opportunity to come up here in 2009.
Okay.
So I'll be 16 years in July. I've been here.
So is this the kind of thing that you thought you wanted to try to marry as far as your interest level and expertise?
Yes. I gained a lot of opportunity working on the farm I was working on.
Right.
It was a pretty progressive farm, and it was really good to have those opportunities to try new technology. One of the things I did before I left is we put telemetry on all the circles, so I was able to run the circles from my phone, the irrigation circles.
Okay.
With a lot of you guys in the
Golf
golf world.
That means nothing to me, but
yeah,
but I kind of get it.
But I can turn water on and off.
Yeah.
No different than sprinkler stations on a course.
Rotational speed control as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then I would also get text message alerts if there was any problem with a machine or anything like that.
Got it.
So, and then with GPS and auto steer and other opportunities along those lines, I gained a lot of experience before I came here, and then started here as a tech, and then kind of worked my way up, and I manage our parts and fabrication department here now. We've got seven members on my team here, and we're just a small company. We're very, very eager to change and able to adapt to any of the needs of the customers.
Yeah.
Kind of change gears mid swath, so to speak, if needed. And I kind of got into it here. I had some on-farm experience, obviously, with sprayers and application equipment and that type of thing. And then when I came here, started getting in on the build side of it. So.
Cool. And you mentioned to me, we took a little tour of the facility and looked at the fab shop and some of the other things that you guys are working on. Company started in 1980 as
an ag retail
supplier.
Yep.
And then the spray parts and service and fabrication started early 2000s.
Yeah, parts and fabrication started in 2000. We moved in, they built this facility here and started the parts department at that time. And then started the fabrication side of it just right about that same time period.
Okay.
So yeah, we're looking at about 25 years on the custom sprayer building side of it.
So as far as the industries you serve, obviously agriculture is
has
rough percentages.
As our name implies, from a fabrication standpoint, the broad acreage ag industry is actually a lower percentage of what we do in our fab shop.
No kidding. Didn't know that.
We do probably the primary industry we serve in our fabrication shop is the vegetation management, roadside spray units, liquid de-icers, snow and ice industry.
Yeah, we looked at a couple of units you guys are just finishing up right now.
But we're involved in ag, golf and turf, veg management, like I mentioned, aquatic We build a lot of
Okay.
custom aquatic sprayers, landscape units, just for the back of pickups for lawn care
Mm-hmm.
type things, forestry. We do a little bit in aviation, dust abatement,
Sure.
pretty much anything liquid handling.
If it has to come out of a nozzle, you build it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything from the tank that the product is stored in to the spray tip that applies it.
Got it. Yeah, your parts department is pretty impressive too. I can't imagine there's anything that we couldn't get from you if we needed it.
Not much. Yeah, not much that we don't have in stock.
So, all right. So I want to dive into kind of what you do in the turf industry in particular, and the first bullet that I wrote down, and I think you kind of added to some of these, some of your thoughts, but obviously our industry is changing like agriculture has, and maybe we're being pulled into some of this technology through the mass of agriculture. I mean, obviously the technology is driven there because that's where the money is, but um, a lot of what you do, I know, is retrofits. Whether it's taking a manual, if you will, sprayer and retrofitting with some of the newer technologies. What would be the benefit to retrofitting versus going with maybe an equipment manufacturer on a national scale? We talked a little bit about it with Gary here earlier, but kind of talk about that. Like, if somebody's looking for the next sprayer, why would it maybe be advantageous for them to look at what they've got or the platform that they're working with, or maybe just build from the ground up with you guys?
So a couple of the key points along those lines that I usually start off the conversations with the customers is most of the courses out there have a power unit that's in decent shape with low hours. There are a lot of sprayers out there, and especially in the inland Northwest, and there's some things that we'll touch on a little later too when it comes to ROI. But when we start talking about the number of hours that we're spraying in Eastern Washington, North Idaho, where we have courses that aren't open 12 months a year, these sprayers don't have that many hours on them. And from a power standpoint, they're in good shape. There's nothing wrong with them. The spray units take a lot of abuse, and maybe there's been some lack of care over time and things like that, and they're not as reliable. So one of the first things that we like to talk about is, do you have a power unit on your course or at your location that's in good running condition? And it doesn't have to be a sprayer. We'll take a Pro Gator with a dump box. We'll take a Multi-Pro with a dump box. We'll pull the dump box off and we can build a sprayer right from the frame up. That's the advantage of having the fabrication facility here. And we can build you the sprayer that's going to fit your needs. And, maybe you need a 200-gallon tank or a 300-gallon tank, or maybe you need a tow behind sprayer. We've built a few of those over the years with different levels of technology. But that's the one thing that I think we've got the flexibility of being a smaller company. We can really hit on the key points and the features that you truly do need on your course. And if there's features you don't need, we don't put them on.
Right. And I was surprised when I asked you this question earlier when we were touring that you have very few prefabricated units. Like, you really build them one-offs based on the customer's needs.
One thing I always like to say is we do everything just like the last one, only different.
I love it.
But yeah, it's one of those things that if you need a sprayer tomorrow, and it's kind of the box store mentality that it's an impulse buy, we're not going to be that fit. But if you need something that serves a specific need on your course, that's where we have that flexibility. And that's what makes it fun too. Everything we do is different, and every customer is a challenge. You have customers across the road from each other that have different needs, and it's challenging for us.
We'll
try to meet those.
We'll get into one of those specifics here a little bit later, but because I think you built a pretty unique one recently that we'll talk about. So this is totally out of order, but I don't know why I put this bullet in here. I must have thought about it. I've always been not confused, but I've always had the question in my mind when, this is maybe a ground level thing, the difference between a diaphragm and a centrifugal pump and why you would choose those. Because, I think it's a little bit, maybe with the generation that I kind of, that I kind of followed, it's almost like a Ford versus Chevy conversation in a lot of ways, where nope, I'm a diaphragm pump guy, and I know it's about generating enough pressure to really move things, whether it's for tree spraying or what have you. But why would I choose one over the other for traditional turf spraying?
Typically, what we see if we're going to start dealing with some of the precision sprayers, and you're spraying fairways, greens, tees, things like that, and you're boom spraying with this unit, I don't see much of a point of having a diaphragm pump if you have technology on board.
Right.
And by saying that, the diaphragm pumps are going to give you the most consistent flow because they are a positive displacement pump.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to give you the most consistent flow every time you turn that nozzle on. So if you don't have any level of technology at all, any type of speed-based compensation, anything like that,
Yep.
you calibrate at 4 miles an hour at 1.2 gallons, you're going to spray that 1.2 gallons at 4 miles an hour every time you flip that switch on. So there is an advantage there to that positive displacement pump.
That makes sense.
Where a centrifugal pump, you have a little bit of variation every time that pump comes on and off, just the nature of the physics of the hydraulics of that, but when we're running flow controls, any type of a speed-based rate controller, we're putting centrifugal pumps on. If we're starting from scratch, we're going to highly recommend going with the centrifugal.
And to compensate for that, it seems like a lot of what you do is a gas-powered unit to run that pump versus maybe running off a PTO.
We would prefer to do hydraulics.
Oh, you would? Okay.
Yep.
Through
the machine.
Through the machine.
Yep.
All right.
Most of the newer machines have plenty of hydraulic capacity to run some of the hydraulic driven pumps.
Okay.
One of the centrifugal pumps that we use primarily, it's actually a pump that is an option on the John Deere Pro Gators from the factory. You can go with the diaphragm or the centrifugal.
Got it.
That's the same centrifugal that we're using. We keep them in stock on the shelf.
Okay.
But if you're tree spraying and you need to get that vertical height, or if you're really needing to get a lot of horizontal throw with a 200-foot hose reel mounted on the unit, the diaphragm pump's tough to beat.
Okay.
You can get up there in that 200 plus PSI range. But
maybe that wasn't such a dumb question.
Diaphragm pumps, they're higher maintenance.
Yeah.
They take, a little bit more to spin them. The centrifugal pumps, short of running them out of product, diaphragm pump will run empty with less damage than a centrifugal. But with the electronics and the technology,
we don't suggest you run either one empty. Right?
Exactly. But with the technology, we also have provisions in there to where when that system stops seeing flow, it's going to shut the pump off automatically. Anyway.
Right.
So it's going to be more forgiving. But yeah, that's
okay. All right. Well, that was kind of an aside, but that's good stuff. So another aside, maybe I kind of got some of the basics out of the way first with my question, the way I've ordered it. So talk about nozzles, maybe sticking specifically, not necessarily just in golf, but more in maybe turf and landscape type of management. What's the most common? What do you recommend? Obviously, it depends a little bit on what kind of products we're spraying, whether it's fungicides or pesticides or fertilizers. But what's your go-to, and what would be kind of your secondary?
So one of the, I guess, just a little bit broader on that, is one of the biggest conversations we have with a lot of people is spray tip selection.
Right.
And it's stuff we see online all the time that, TJEC came out with this new spray tip. Hypro came out with this new spray tip. All the other brands, they're releasing these new technologies. And a lot of times those new technologies are targeted towards one specific product.
Sure.
One of the things that drives spray tip technology is dicamba application in the Midwest. And it's not that those technologies are not important here, but we have a lot of
dicamba on turf isn't necessarily the best application.
Right. So, be careful of what you're reading as far as social media goes and things like that. They're good products, but they're not really marketed towards what we're dealing with. Anytime I'm doing a spray tip presentation or anything, or training or anything with customers, one of the first things that I tell everybody that if it's not broke, don't fix it till it is.
Okay.
If you have a tip that's working on your course, on your lawn application, whatever the case is, broad acre ag, if you have tips that you're getting the efficacy, you're not having drift problems, you're getting those droplets on target, you're getting the job done to a satisfactory manner, you probably don't need to look at changing the tip type.
Okay.
Now you need to make sure the tips are in good condition.
Great point.
As far as the type of tip goes, the air inducted tips are really great for throwing a larger droplet size, reducing drift, things like that. When we start getting into technology with our PWM nozzle control, the pulsating nozzles that you'll see on a lot of newer sprayers out there today, most of the air inducted nozzles are not recommended to be used with the PWM system.
Oh, okay.
So really understanding what type of system it is when
it's all interconnected. So what is recommended in that case?
So just most all of the non-air inducted.
Okay.
So you can go with any of the traditional flat fan nozzles.
Got it.
We've got some running with twin fans, so you've got a nozzle spraying forward and spraying backwards at the same time. There's a lot of personal preference. There's a lot of people that have good experience with a specific brand or a specific type. We generally, not to plug for TJet, but we generally recommend going the TJet route just because they're one of the industry leaders.
Yeah, of course.
And that's what we keep on the shelf.
Yep.
We do have some limited nozzles. We're also a Hypro dealer, a Greenleaf dealer, a Wilger dealer. We cover most all the brands. So we can meet those needs, but it's the spray tip selection is really a lengthy conversation with each individual person.
Sure.
But the biggest thing is I don't think people need to get too caught up in, I need to try the latest and greatest. If you're having problems, or if you have a different chemistry that you're using and it requires a different droplet size, then we need to look into changing, because you can be off label with the improper spray tip.
Good point.
Just like you can be off label from a rate tip.
Yeah. So what is it about the air induction that doesn't mesh well with
the way I understand it? It's just the process of encapsulating that air with that droplet. The time it takes to do that, when you're interrupting that flow with that pulsation, it actually interrupts.
Kind of almost playing catch up.
Yeah, you don't get that consistent droplet size.
I get it. Okay. Well, like you said, you could have a whole conversation just about spray tip selection.
Yeah.
And I see. I mean, I guess with a computerized system, it gives you a lot more flexibility in the field, right?
Absolutely.
And so do you do a lot of outfitting with a multiple nozzle selector on the boom, or not?
It depends on the application. When we're running the PWM technology, where we're pulsating nozzles, we're actually predefining the pressure we want to spray at. So we can actually change on the fly. Not only can we change that pressure and still keep the rate the same, but we actually have the ability, because of that, to change droplet size. So if we're in an area of a course that maybe we've got some sensitive flower beds or something that
within the same nozzle. Okay.
And the way that happens is it's the duty cycle. There's a solenoid at each spray tip, and it just increases the duty cycle, and it'll shoot a 30 PSI pulse if that's what we have programmed.
Okay.
And if we want to drop it down to 20, we can just hit a button on screen, change it to 20, and it's still spraying at our 1.0 or whatever we have for a rate, but it's shooting 20 PSI pulses, which in turn creates a bigger droplet size.
Yeah. All right.
When we get away from that sensitive area, we can crank the pressure back up again.
So I've jumped way ahead, and we need to back up a little bit and kind of talk a little more about the pulsating technology, the interface with the computer, and kind of how, we're getting into GPS here, but how does that all work? Why is pulsating technology the desired way to deliver the product to the nozzles? And
a couple of the key features by having that technology, one, like we just mentioned with droplet size, we can control droplet size and pressure. Another thing that it allows you to do is you actually have a lot broader speed range available with that nozzle.
Sure.
So just standard out of the box kind of rule of thumb was a 4x turn down. So if you have a number 10 spray tip, you could actually spray down to what a 2.5 would spray, just because you're pulsing that down.
Yeah. With the pulsing technology. I got it.
So you're limited to a certain range with any nozzle. You're limited even if you have a computer controlling the rate. You still have that physical limitation of the spray tip. We can adjust that with that PWM. The other thing that allows you to do is we have an individual solenoid on each spray tip. We can control those independently. So we also have turn compensation. So because of changing that duty cycle on those nozzles, when we have a dog leg in a fairway, we can bend around that corner, and it's going to increase the duty cycle on the outside nozzles and decrease on the inside.
How long has that feature been available?
It's been, I would say, widely available for the last 10 to 12 years.
Okay. I didn't have that, I don't think, on my first system. So
no, you had the pulsation, but not the turn compensation,
correct.
I believe. Yeah.
Which is like you said, I mean, that's maybe the big difference between agriculture and certainly in golf turf is we're trying to spray circles with square technology. So to have that turn compensation is pretty important.
Yeah. And then that also allows us to have a shut off at the nozzle level.
Yeah.
So as we start overlapping, jumping ahead into the GPS, but as we start overlapping, we can instantly turn on and off each one of those nozzles.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me, just having that level of accuracy. Because again, like I told Gary earlier, the biggest hurdle in my mind to me jumping into GPS was how do we spray a circle with a square? Yeah. And once we saw that individual nozzle control proven, it was all over for me. I knew we were in it, and it's amazing the accuracy and the repeatability with some of the communication technology and with reference to geolocating and things like that. I'm blown away by how accurate and how repeatable things can be if you're on a growth regulator program, or if you're on a selective herbicide program. How many times you can do that in a very repeatable fashion with a map that's already locked in. It's incredible.
Yep.
Just
yeah,
incredible.
We're still fitting that square peg in a round hole, but
Yeah.
instead of having an 8-foot boom section for that square peg, now we've got a 20-inch nozzle.
The square pegs are nicely rounded over.
Yeah, square pegs are smaller. So, yeah.
So all right, so let's get into what I really wanted to talk about, and that's GPS specific. What would you say the biggest hurdle is if you're talking to a turf manager, whether he's on a landscape, in the landscape industry, or golf or sports turf? What's the biggest hurdle? Is it mental? Is it budgetary?
Honestly, I think it's mental. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Obviously there's budgetary constraints and everything else, but I think the mental part of it is not only from a willingness to change, but also the knowledge of what's out there and how it can benefit you,
which is really important.
And there again, being a smaller company, we can cater that to the course's
Sure.
needs, because your smaller 9-hole municipality course is not going to be able to afford or justify, not afford, but justify that same level of technology as a course that's open 12 months a year that's got 36 holes. I mean, we really have to see what the needs are for that particular customer, but there are levels of precision that can be added to any customer's application.
Yeah, and I think maybe to our detriment, our industry doesn't they don't weigh return on investment as heavily as they could or should, and so those budget decision making processes maybe are lacking that piece that really could put them over the edge. I used the new autonomous mowers as an example. I had a demo about this time last year locally, and it was as if Moses had parted the seas. When the price came up, half the group just split and said, "Oh, that's too expensive," and the other half, and it wasn't just the high end guys, but they looked at it and said, "Wait a minute, I just wrote a check for $110,000 for a unit that I've got to put an operator on." And there's all these other things involved. So looking at it from a 30,000 foot view, we talked a little bit this morning about how I cut from 2 sprayers using manual sprayers. From 2 sprayers, it took us 5 hours to spray fairways, down to 1 in 4 hours. Increase ground speed, reduce the amount of product, reduce the amount of treated acres, and the ROI was inside of 2 years, and we have that unit paid for without spraying a lot of pesticides.
Right.
Pretty amazing.
Yep.
Okay, so now we've got over the hump. We understand that it's worth the investment. And because everything is so different based on your customer's needs, we're not going to get a lot into cost. I don't think that's really the conversation, because it's so variable.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so variable. So, all right, now I've made the decision that I think GPS, the next time I'm looking at a sprayer, I think GPS is probably something I want to integrate into my systems. What other considerations, whether it's other costs involved, because there are some built-in costs with that. What are the technological hurdles that we need to get over as a user? Some of the things we need to consider if we're thinking about getting into that.
So some of the things as far as the GPS goes is accuracy.
Right.
And you found out, I don't know if we'll say the hard way, but you found out.
I did. I thought I could do it without
the standard run of the mill loss correction. It's a sub-meter, and without getting too far into the weeds as far
let's
as
get a little into the weeds, because I think it's a really important part of it.
So yeah, with the WAS or SBAS, SBAS is more commonly referred to now. Most of the manufacturers, doesn't matter technology, what brand it is, they're using that free correction source. And that gives you a sub-meter repeatability.
Right.
So there's a difference between pass to pass and sub-meter. And pass to pass accuracy is within a 15-minute window.
That's the key.
And that is the key
That
right there.
is the key.
The WAS corrections, you're very likely going to see a 6 to 9 inch repeatability or pass to pass reliability.
Yeah.
But your repeatability over time is sub-meter.
Right.
So, you could be almost on the one end of the scale on the, within that 3 foot meter accurate.
Correct.
And then you come back later that day, you get caught by play, you run out of product halfway across the fairway, you come back and all of a sudden you've got a 5 foot skip and it's a perfectly lined up skip all the way across your fairway. And
in some cases I could watch it shifting.
Yeah.
And knew that my accuracy was out the window.
And that comes into play more with trees than some of the other correction sources. But so that is one thing that I think has helped us adopt GPS onto the courses more efficiently now than ever, is because we have other accuracy solutions that weren't as attainable years ago. RTK is the most accurate. It's a sub-inch repeatability over time. So we go out and map that course. Your maps are going to be within an inch of where you made that map out time after time after time, year after year. That requires a base station. There's some logistical challenges with that as well.
Are you typically outfitting, if it's a golf course, are you typically outfitting that property with an RTK base station, or are you doing some sharing still?
Really, we're sharing.
Okay.
In most situations, we're sharing, trying to cut costs down a little bit with customers, share some of that cost. We have some courses that own their own base. We own some bases ourselves that we have located at different courses that are sharing. The one thing with and I guess we didn't touch on it a whole lot, but we deal with Raven technology. It's a product that we've decided to choose. Raven's RTK solution is a cellular-based RTK.
Okay.
And so that allows, as long as the unit in the field is sharing 5 satellites in common with the base station, you can still achieve RTK corrections.
Okay.
So we've got, when we were doing some testing on a project we'll talk about here a little later on, I was hooked up to the base at the resort from here. So we're 30 plus miles, miles, and still getting RTK corrections. There's other limitations that can come into play there. But when we don't physically have the means to put an RTK base there, we also have a satellite-based correction source now, and Raven calls it GS Pro. But it's a subscription based, and we can get into that 2 to 4 inch repeatability with that,
so that's kind of a middle of the road solution. Okay.
It doesn't give you that sub inch, so things are going to shift. But if we go back to our
what was that called?
It's a GS Pro is what Raven calls it.
Okay.
It's a satellite based, subscription based RTK, or not
without
RTK,
the base station.
Without the base station.
And the base station, if I understand this correctly, and do correct me if I'm wrong, the base station is a known correction point, so it can kind of triangulate on the satellites. Right.
Yeah. So what that base does, it actually gets surveyed in. So it will be taken offline for 24 hours to survey it, and it basically just watches for GPS shift over that 24-hour period.
Okay.
And then what it's doing is it's telling, your sprayer in the field says, okay, satellite 138 is at this position, and the base station is saying, no, it's actually over here 6 inches. It's really not in that position.
And that's where you get that repeatable sub-inch.
So
cost wise, I mean, is there a huge difference between what Raven's offering and what RTK would give you?
The satellite based and the RTK subscriptions are very similar.
Okay.
It's a hardware difference.
Okay.
The satellite based correction does not require a cell service on the machine, so we don't have to have that modem on the machine, and we don't have to have that data plan.
So it's more in the hardware side of things that the cost might be a little bit higher.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, the subscriptions are similar. I mean, there's a little difference.
What would I expect to spend on an annual basis, ballpark?
The satellite based, it's around $1,300 a year.
Okay. And then RTK
is right in that range. Maybe a little bit more, but then you have that data plan on top of that with RTK that adds to that.
Sure, that makes sense.
But if we have that data on there, it also gives us additional flexibility, so we can do remote data transfer. So every time you're done with the job,
Good
that
point.
job is automatically uploaded to a cloud-based server. So you have all those as applied records. We actually can.
So is that a compliance benefit?
Yes,
I would think
it makes your record keeping easier.
Yeah.
You've got all that data, and that most of that data is hard coded. So it's
excellent.
Depending on
Didn't even
your
think about
state
that.
agency and things like that, the Department of Ag or whoever you're reporting to, sometimes they will accept the report just out of the slingshot, out of the Raven file. Other times it has to be manipulated a little bit into their form, but the data is there. Yes,
that could be huge. I didn't even think about that.
It's on the manager's desk as soon as they close the job.
And I would think that troubleshooting and tech support from your side is also something that you would gain from that, right?
Absolutely. And that's one thing we can do too with the remote support. So if you have a data stream on that field computer, you can hit a button that says request support, and you can give us a code, and we can remotely log into your field computer just like an IT department would log into your desktop or your laptop. So we can help punch buttons and diagnose problems, or use it as a training tool.
Yeah. I hear this a lot from clients of ours that 10 or 15 years ago, having all of these subscriptions was almost unheard of, and now you're subscribing to this service and that service. And I've got a good friend of mine that I think he did a sprayer for him down in the Bay Area. He's looking to hire an IT guy within the maintenance department just to manage all of this technology. And I think that's where we're going in a lot of cases. And, big operation there. He's got 45 holes that he's trying to manage, but yeah, it's interesting how that's changed. And I don't think it's as, at the time when I first jumped in, which had to have been, I know it was at least 10 years, it was probably 15 years ago. I was nervous at trying to present this to the owners that we'd have a subscription for the RTK in the first place. And now, there's a half a dozen of them, I think, that are happening there.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the other thing too with that is having that data on board. We're starting to see a lot more interest in, and we have quite a few units out in the field right now running this, but we actually have machine to machine communication as well. So we have job sharing. So we can send one sprayer out.
That's what they're doing.
And when he goes back to fill, if the other sprayer comes into that same area,
right,
we have that automatic shut off. We know exactly where that job was done. We have a course that's got a bigger sprayer that potentially, they could go spray their main runs down the middle of the fairway, and then you can send a smaller sprayer out to stitch in around the edges.
Sure.
And it's about efficiency.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that job sharing piece is huge.
Yeah. Just you don't see that need everywhere, but where it's needed.
Right.
It's a huge bonus.
If it's on a course, a bigger course, and you're trying to get across the course with multiple sprayers, it makes a big difference.
So you already mentioned that your preferred partner is Raven, and is Sharpshooter still the platform that you're using within?
Raven uses a Hawkeye system.
Hawkeye. Okay.
Okay. Sharpshooter is a Capstan product.
That's right.
Capstan has actually moved on to additional technologies as well. But
thank you for that correction.
But very similar,
right?
Still solenoid at the spray tip.
Ford and Chevy, right?
Yep. And Capstan has the turn compensation and a lot of those same features that we were talking about now that they didn't used to.
Okay.
The Capstan product was one of the first ones we saw in the industry.
Yep.
And then we actually in 2015, I guess kind of goes into another bullet point here on how we got started. But we'd been working with yourself and some other local courses earlier on, but in 2015 we really kind of decided that this was going to be a switch for us. We're going to put more emphasis on, and we actually hired a former superintendent assistant superintendent spray tech to come on board to kind of help us with our knowledge base.
Right.
Because we're not going to come in here and try to tell you guys how to do your job when we don't know how to do it ourselves, And so brought him on board and learned a lot there, and we brought that ProGator on, and that actually was right shortly after Raven had come out with the Hawkeye system.
Okay.
And so we actually helped develop a lot of the cabling systems and things for that ProGator chassis. We had they're yellow tag cables. They were pre-production cables on that first unit we built. Worked with Raven a lot on the some behind the scenes programming and really getting things dialed in. And that was the first golf course sprayer that was known. I'm not going to say it's the first ever anywhere, but the first one that had that full suite of Raven electronics on it, including hydraulic auto steer. I ended up coming up with some hydraulic specs from the ProGator that matched a smaller frame John Deere wheel tractor that Raven happened to have a steering kit for, and was able to retrofit that steering kit from a tractor onto the Pro Gator. And that one we did in 2015 was hydraulically steered.
Right, I remember that.
From an auto steer perspective.
And so that's kind of my next bullet, but I wanted to give you guys a plug, because the other thing that, there's a lot of technology and a lot of hardware involved with integrating this into a platform that's already there. The fit and the finish on that unit in particular, and that was, like you said, your first run. I mean, it wasn't like some Frankenstein thing that you put together. You were ready to sell that thing when you came out and did some filming at my golf course.
Yeah.
So it was
absolutely.
pretty impressive.
Well, and that's the thing too. We're customizing things and we're doing things differently than the OEMs are, but bottom line is it still has to look the part.
Right.
I mean, we can't have something out there that's got cables dragging on the ground and really just suffer, the reliability suffers.
Yeah.
And everything else. And a good part of it too is aesthetic value. If you're trying to market the ROI to a board or to members or something else, and they see some Frankenstein piece in the back lot,
right?
Like, we really paid for that.
Who built this?
So and the other part of it too is that cleanliness of the build actually helps the operator's efficiency.
Right.
They're not tripping over wires, getting in and out of the unit. They're not frustrated every time they get on it to use it.
And you said too, fewer failure points as well. I mean, if everything's kind of fit together and
absolutely,
and neat and clean. Auto steer, we talked a little bit about it out in the yard a little earlier today. Percentage wise, how many units are you fitting with auto steer now? I totally get it if I'm drilling a 500 acre plot of wheat. I get that.
Yep.
But is it something you're recommending or outfitting more now?
We're throwing it out there to everybody. I like to have the conversation with everybody.
Right.
I would say roughly a third of our GPS golf course sprayers have auto steer on them.
It's more than I would have thought.
We've done quite a few. The other thing now is Raven has come out with a product that they call direct steer, which is a mechanical steer unit. They had some products in the past that were mechanically steered. They just turned it to an electric motor that turns the steering wheel for you. Okay. They've had some different product offerings in the past that didn't have the accuracy and reliability of what this direct steer has now. I think, it's coming in at a fairly cost-effective point, and the accuracy is proving to be really good.
So there is a difference between direct steer and auto steer?
Yes. So direct steer is the electric motor. That's a brand name, but the direct steer is an electric motor that goes on and turns the wheel for you.
Okay.
The auto steer systems that are hydraulically driven that we did before, we actually are incorporating in a hydraulic block, and we're actually moving the hydraulic oil behind the scenes to move that steering cylinder, so your steering wheel doesn't turn.
So the wheel's not physically turning.
The direct steer system, if you're driving it out down the fairway and you're going around a corner, I mean, you're seeing that steering wheel turn all the time, and it's just doing what you can do manually.
Is there an advantage to either one?
The cost and the flexibility of the platform of the mechanical steering is a lot better.
Is better.
There's a lot more involved with machine-specific kits when it comes to hydraulics.
Okay.
The other thing that we have challenges with the hydraulic systems is with an open center hydraulic system that's a relatively low flow system, like a lot of these golf course units have, and you guys have experienced it, I'm sure. They steer harder when you're idling.
Sure.
Than and so when you're trying to calibrate that in, it's a little trickier, where that electric motor can compensate for that a little bit.
Yeah, it's just turning it.
And it's been, it was a little bit slow in development, but working with Raven, our technology partner, we had a challenge trying to steer a Toro unit we have in the field here. We couldn't get the direct steer to work. And what it came down to is the Toros use a single steering cylinder. And the only reason that matters is it takes more revolutions of the wheel to steer one way than it does the other.
Okay.
So there's algorithms behind the scenes that were not functioning, and we brought that to Raven's attention, and it took a little while to get developed, but we now have software to compensate for that so that we can steer those single cylinder units as well. So
it sounds like if you were building a sprayer for yourself, you'd have it included.
I would. From a golf course standpoint, smaller greens and tees, I don't, back to your question, obviously the broader the acreage, the more it fits. Smaller greens and tees, probably not. By the time you get, you have to get that sprayer lined up fairly well
Right.
on your own anyway. And by the time you get out there and you engage the steering, you're going to be partway across to smaller greens.
But on a fairway spray or something.
Higher
like that.
square footage greens,
Yep.
some of your bigger greens out there, and then fairways. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got that individual nozzle control, so we're shutting off with overlap. But the closer we can run to that maximum width of the sprayer, the quicker we're going to get done. The fewer passes down the fairway.
Yep, that makes sense. So what am I going to add to an average sprayer?
In a lot of situations, depending on how it's set up in the background moving forward, but you can get into some pretty accurate steering solutions for 8 to 10,000.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. You sold me. I'm ready to order one. Okay, so obviously you started in agriculture. You started in more in product sales, right? And turned around the turn of the century. We can talk about turn of the century now. You got into more parts and service and manufacturing. How has this is from our friend Sean Rehorn, actually. I asked him for a couple of questions. How is having part of your business in the turf industry benefited the ag side and vice versa?
That's a really good question, Sean.
He will be listening, I'm sure.
So really the bottom line is the more equipment we have out there, the more diverse we are, the better we know the product,
Sure.
The better we can serve all industries.
Yep.
The broad acreage ag, it's like you mentioned at the start of this podcast, the broad acreage is what's driven a lot of this technology.
Yep.
And I'll take it one step further. In the Pacific Northwest in broad acreage ag, we're already used to adopting technology to our needs because everything is corn and soybean based out of the Midwest.
Yep.
Because that's where the drivers of the technology are.
Right.
That's where the money is. So we're already used to taking technology that somebody else is using in a different way, and we're adopting it to a different market.
So we're doing the same thing on a smaller scale.
Yeah, we've been doing that in our broad acreage ag since the beginning of our company.
Yeah.
Now we're just adopting it in a different manner. But we can see limitations, service life challenges, things like that in broad acreage ag a lot more quickly than we see it in golf, because we have, instead of having 13 nozzles out there running with those pulsating nozzles, we've got 83. And
on one spray unit,
or we'll have a 132-foot sprayer out there that's traveling 16 miles an hour.
Say that again, Ryan. How big?
132.
132-foot boom going 16 miles an hour on the terrain that we do in this part of the country.
Yes.
Okay.
We work with a company who custom builds self-propelled sprayers, and they're a smaller, very like-minded company. With us. They're a great partner of ours. And they're actually building a sprayer. They don't have one out here yet. They've been selling them more in Montana, Canada, but they're building a 3,000-gallon tank on these chassis with 132-foot booms. And in the ag industry, 10 gallons an acre is a fairly common.
I was just going to point that out.
So,
3,000, that's a whole day.
You're 300 acres of load.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to, spraying 45 to 60 gallons an acre.
Yeah.
At 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour. So we can cover a lot more acres. I mean, we have customers that have sprayed over 2,000 acres in a day.
Jeez.
And that's kind of the exception on the other extreme. But that being said, we're seeing a lot of service life on these steering systems, on these GPS systems. We're seeing a lot of varying terrain. We might not have some of the buildings and tree challenges that you do on a course, but we've got some steep hills.
Yeah,
especially you get into southeastern Washington here, we deal with some extreme terrain. So we can see a lot of those limitations and challenges, and then we can scale them down to the course.
I didn't put this bullet down, but one of the things with respect to terrain is somehow boom sensing what's going on around you. So what's the best solution on golf courses where the terrain is ever changing? What's the best solution for that? And do you include those?
We do. That is one of the areas where we branch away from Raven. Raven doesn't have a solution for the small electric driven boom sprayers.
Okay.
We stick with Raven boom height on our big sprayers. Obviously, if you have a 132-foot boom, you have to have that compensation.
Sure.
But on our smaller golf sprayers, we actually use the Greentronics brand.
Okay. Sonar based?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Very similar to Sonic Boom that the Toro has, but it's more tunable, more customizable.
Okay.
we can get it dialed in a little bit better.
And
And
you-
that's not speaking against, the
Yeah, no.
That's what our
That's
preference
just your
has been,
preference.
so, yeah.
And you mentioned I assume it's your preference then to have electric operators on the booms.
So most of the boom height is electric over hydraulic.
Okay.
The bigger those KYB actuators
Yeah.
that most all the
Yeah.
brands use. We can do hydraulic systems. That's one of the things. A hydraulic boom height system is going to be quicker to react and going to be a little bit better
Mhm.
with the booms on the courses. But we have live hydraulics.
Again,
running
you're stealing
to the
from
boom,
you're stealing from one pump.
and hydraulic cylinders tend to leak over time.
Yep.
And we all know how
Yeah.
well the turf industry likes hydraulic oil.
Yeah. Really well.
And I know there's some other compounds, there's some other oils that are
Yeah.
safer for turf and everything. But traditionally, what we've done so far on most all of our golf sprayers, it's been the electric over hydraulic actuators.
Okay. Yeah, I get that, and it's probably responsive enough that
Yeah.
you don't notice much.
And you're
of a lag.
traveling 3 or 4 miles an hour. I mean,
Right.
we've like these 132-foot booms. Raven's new XRT boom height is radar sensor. And so we can actually sense canopy height or ground in a
really?
crop type situation.
Okay.
And we've got 7 sensors we're putting across these 132-foot booms, and we're keeping booms level at 16 plus miles an hour.
Jeez. How many sections? If you're talking 132 feet, is that 3 sections or more?
When we're going with that PWM nozzle control, we're doing the individual nozzle shutoff just like we would. So we've got 83 sections or 81 sections, so
Okay.
to speak, at the individual nozzles. Most all the sprayers are running 7 to 9 sections.
Okay.
If they're just using traditional boom valves.
Got it. So that everything can fold up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out at a sod grower friend of mine out a little bit further west of here, and he was his equipment tech was fabricating this really impressive air seeder. Do you do any work with that type of technology?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. We've actually built some big direct seeding no-till drill air carts for
Okay.
the ag industry. We built a steerable hitch cart here a number of years ago. It's 250 bushels of wheat with 600 gallons of liquid product hanging on it, pulling a no-till drill. So we've custom built some of that equipment, but we do retrofit technology onto a lot of those.
Okay.
That's a big portion
Yeah.
of our business.
Sure.
Broad acreage ag. Being able to put hydraulic drive motors on those metering devices so we can control the speed of the meter. We can vary the application rates.
Yeah.
We're doing section control, just like we're talking about turning nozzles on and off. We're turning fertilizer sections on and off on these.
Interesting. Is there an application in the turf industry?
I think there is.
Maybe on a contract side, but would there be on an individual user?
I think there could be.
Okay.
I think that's another one of those
What?
potential.
What in particular?
I think more from a granular standpoint. I think there's some opportunity there on top dressing and fertilizer spreading.
Interesting.
Where we can control the rate that it's going out, and we can meter that, and we can map it, even if you're not varying that rate.
Yeah, good point.
Who's to say that maybe this top dress rate versus this rate in this soil condition is going to be more beneficial?
Sure.
Sure. And it's all about reducing inputs,
right,
and increasing the aesthetics of the course.
Yeah.
I mean, your aesthetics on a course is your yield when you're, using ag terminology, but
yeah,
I think there's opportunity there, to control spinner spreaders, especially with GPS location. You know exactly where you've been and where you haven't. You're not having the double overlap, or if you are overlapping and double spreading.
Are you doing any of that now with spinner spreaders?
We've got some people that have purchased units that are starting to go down that road.
That makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. And controlling that is the next step.
Now, could I, in theory, if I already had a Raven platform, could I just be bouncing that between units?
Yes.
Okay.
They're, with some wiring and ease of movement and everything else, but the field computers themselves are capable of storing multiple profiles.
Sure.
So even if you have something that's dedicated to a tractor, and you have a tow behind sprayer, and then you have a tow behind top dress unit, you have a tow behind fertilizer applicator, or 3-point mounted for that mount.
Right.
That point, you can have your different profiles set up in the computer, and you just change You change your implement in the computer just like you would change the implement on the hitch.
On the hitch. That makes sense. Gosh, I never even thought about that. All right, guys.
But
Now
we
got something new to spend money on.
It's a lot of this.
Yeah.
That's what's fun in the industry is there again. We've been doing this in agriculture for decades.
Forever, right?
And what are the needs? Maybe there's not a need to vary the rate of top dressing, but as in how many people have actually
What
done
if we
the
could?
research and tried it?
Yeah. What if we could?
Yeah. You don't know what the ROI is until
Interesting.
you actually try it.
All right. Okay, so this is a non-negotiable in my opinion, and you and I have talked about this, and I know you do a lot of these, but two things in golf specifically that just boggle my mind are the lack of a sod nursery on the property, which isn't your purview necessarily, but the lack of a premix tank for anybody that's doing regular spraying. It just, I can't wrap my head around how you can't justify that. So what's something that you would recommend we look for if we're thinking about using a premix tank or having you build me one? Volume, add-ons, things like that. What's important on that?
Some of the advantages, I guess. I mean,
besides having one.
Yeah, besides having one of the biggest advantages of having one, just to touch on that I think is one of the biggest things is you have consistency across your course.
Right.
There's the efficiency things and everything else, but you batch that product for that course, and your entire course is treated in the same manner. If you're mixing product at every single tank load, especially with smaller sprayers, that consistency is not.
That's a good point.
It's going to be very difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
That way.
Yep.
So the consistent application is a huge part of it. Then the time savings.
Yeah. Big time.
Along those lines, before we talk about how to spec them, we have one customer that we built a unit for about 2 years ago, I guess. I just talked to him this morning just to make sure I had my numbers straight. But they were their fairway spraying was 25 acres, and they were spraying 12 hours is what it took them to spray that 25 acres, just coming back and batching each time, which translates into at least 2 days.
Correct.
Because you're getting caught by play and everything else.
Yep.
They now spray that 25 acres in 6 to 7 hours. So they cut their spray time in half.
Mm-hmm. Which probably keeps them ahead of the first group.
And this in my mind is a very accurate example. I mean, every course is going to be a little different, but they did not change the technology on their fairway sprayer. It's the exact same sprayer. It's the same spray tech.
Manually operated or
manually operated.
Okay.
Yes.
So he doesn't have that advantage.
Not yet.
Well, yeah.
But yes. Yeah. So
this is the only component he changed
is instead of filling the sprayer with the garden hose, they're now filling it out of a batch tank.
Wow.
And
cut his time in half.
Yep. We've also automated that batch tank so that when he turns the water on, we program in how many gallons of water he wants in the tank.
Right.
And he can walk away.
Yeah.
And
that's huge.
He knows that tank is going to be filled to an exact amount every single time. And then with a recirculation pump and a mix cone on the ground beside the batch tank, he can incorporate all of the fertility or chemistry or whatever into there without. We also built a ladder and a platform up top, but without having to climb up to the top of the tank. You can stand on the ground. You can get all that incorporated in. As far as speccing those systems out, I'd like to find out what the maximum number of gallons you're going to spray on your course per application
and try to match that.
So what's it take to, and I'd like to overshoot it by 200 or 300 gallons.
Sure.
If you're going
to, the tank costs nothing.
Yes.
In the grand scheme.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're going to spray 1,200 gallons out, if you're going to spray 1,100 gallons out, I'm going to probably try to push you towards a 1,600 gallon.
or 18, yeah.
Because we've got a 1,200 gallon option that works really well. We've got a 1,600.
Okay.
That's kind of in that same footprint.
Yep.
And like you said,
a few $100 difference.
A few $100 difference. Yeah. And then you're not boiling that tank right out the lid trying to get that last amount of product in. But if you're going to do it, my advice would be to make the commitment to go with a large enough tank to where you can do your whole course.
Yeah, for sure.
Short of maybe a fence to fence snow mold application or something like that. But on your daily or your weekly sprays, your monthly sprays.
Yeah.
Make it easy.
Yep.
Have everything solutionized, everything ready to go. You roll in with that sprayer, you blow the product in, and you're gone.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's a huge time saver, and I had the advantage at my last golf course that we had 2 crews running, and so I would actually give the recipe to my night crew guys. They would mix so that first thing in the morning, 90 seconds, tank is filled and they're out the door, and it was just a tremendous savings of time. Okay, so let's get our crystal ball out for a minute, kind of as we wrap up here, and I wanted to get your feeling on what's on the horizon. One of the things I asked you earlier is drone tech and things like that, and it sounds like you're not quite there yet, but I know they're trying to fit it. It might be a square peg around a hole again right now, but I'm sure as the end user pushes, they'll get it. So what's in the next 5 years? What would we expect to see in the turf market?
One of the big hot topics now in all markets, I think, is autonomy. I mean, we start talking about autonomy. I would take it the next step further is autonomous versus autonomy. So we are taking these steps that are automating processes that are getting us closer to full autonomy, like your mowers, like you mentioned earlier. It's in agriculture, a tillage operation is going to be automated long before an application will be.
Sure.
We have a lot of logistical issues pulling into that batch tank and filling with a fully autonomous unmanned.
Right.
We're not quite there. The technology is there, but the adoption we're way down.
Your Tesla can plug itself in at this point.
Yeah. So going down that road, but you look at lane keep assist and things we're seeing on cars.
Right.
It's trickling down. I mean, it's
sure.
in every industry out there. So automating processes, the drones, the imagery part of drone technology, I think is huge. I think we're going to see more of that moving forward in golf and turf. Identifying problem areas, mapping out those problem areas, and then being able to go out with some of the spray technology and spot spray. So if we have, a weed escape, or if we have an off-type grass that's in a fairway that we need to target, something the size of a piece of paper,
right?
We can go out there with
the hardware's there,
a glyphosate type product, and kill that 1 foot square.
Right.
And we can identify that with the drone. We can make that map. We can import that map into the sprayer and just go out and drive. And every time we get to those target areas, it's going to spray that specific spot and nowhere else.
Could I do that today?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. There are companies out there that are gathering that technology.
Yeah.
And it's all about scale. It's about getting it to the right courses at the right time.
Because I assume you're utilizing technology that can do prescription applications in agriculture now.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And then the other thing too is the what the industry calls sense and act technology.
Okay.
So we'll have onboard camera technology on the sprayers and making adjustments on the fly. We're starting to see things more in the broad acre jag side of it with varying fertility rates based on plant health. And that plant health is coming from imagery.
Yeah.
And so we can vary the rate of fertilizer going out on the crop based on the health of that crop. And it's all about getting the algorithms written in and everything else. The camera the sensing technology is there. And the act portion of it is there.
Yeah.
But it's just getting the right crop type.
Getting the data
and figuring out what that color of green means and what that color of yellow means and things like that. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that in the very near future.
Huh. All right. So we're going to gosh, that's exciting. That's really exciting. I know a lot of you don't jump into stuff as quickly as I do, but that's pretty exciting to hear. You recently built a pretty unique sprayer. I probably could have done this a little earlier for a friend of ours here in town on a Sandstar?
Sandstar E.
Yeah. So basically a bunker.
A bunker. Yep.
Why and what was different about that? Why did you build that? Probably the reason why is he had something similar to it in a more rudimentary form before.
That's a good portion of it, yes. But the other part of that why is why not?
Okay. All right.
Because nobody else is.
Yeah. So one of the differences I noticed, because I saw the sprayer last week, was at Black Rock, just down the road from us, is your nozzle spacing was a lot tighter than maybe we're used to. But it gives us flexibility in the field to vary rate and range and things like that. So obviously a little more upfront cost, but that flexibility the piece that he wanted.
To back up just a little bit. This project actually started in 2018.
Okay.
With the former superintendent.
Yep.
And he came to us and said, "Hey, I've always thought that we have some unique areas. We have some tee boxes that we can't get to with sprayers. We're tired of spray hawking everything and dragging hose and everything else. There's got to be a more efficient way." So we actually took a 15-gallon ATV sprayer. We built a custom boom on it with no technology, just set the pressure, try to drive.
Well, so you built that sprayer for them
Yes.
too. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't realize you were involved with that one
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. He came to us with that challenge.
Yeah.
And we built that
Okay.
sprayer. And it was just proof of concept.
Right.
And
right.
Before we threw a bunch of money at something, we wanted to see if it was going to work for their needs. It did. Then we had the COVID era. We have change in leadership, budgetary restraints with different projects going on the course, things like that. So now here we are quite a few years later. And Dan came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do this. And oh, by the way, it needs to be all electric. We're going to put it on this Sandstar E." And so a little over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago now, I guess, they committed to purchasing a electric bunker rake.
Yep.
The full electric system was a huge challenge, to say the least, with us, because there aren't pumps out there that are capable of running Gulf rates with the boomlets that we wanted. So it took a lot of design changes and a lot of research and a lot of searching and testing here, but ultimately we ended up with, it's a 15-gallon spray unit. It's got the 10-foot boom on 10-inch centers. The nozzles are on 10-inch centers. It's an actuated boom, so it folds up, so it's the width of the buggy when they go down the cart path, getting in and out of areas. It has RTK GPS. It has the Viper 4 Raven field computer on it. It's got all of the same technology that the 132-foot boom egg sprays have on it. All packaged up into a small package. And it was a big challenge for us from a design standpoint, because nobody had ever done it before. Just not to our knowledge. We didn't really have resources to draw from, but ultimately we ended up getting things dialed in, and that 10-inch nozzle spacing, it allows us to run a higher rate because we have twice as many nozzles, so we can run a lower rate per nozzle. So we've got some flexibility there. It also gets those square peg round hole mentalities. We're shutting off 10-inch square sections instead of 20-inch. We still have that turn compensation that we talked about, things like that, but they can get into these little tight tee box areas and be able to get those mapped out reliably and have those nozzles turn on and off accordingly. And yes, it's a 15-gallon sprayer. You're not going to go out and spray fairways with it. It requires a nurse trailer going around, chasing it around to support the crew, but it's still
something
efficient.
they had already had that set up. So
they were doing that with the spray hawk before. So
exactly.
They still have the same number of personnel doing it.
Right.
They still have the tow behind tank unit that they were using for the spray hawk. Now they just use it as a nurse trailer to refill.
That makes sense.
And then you're only packing that 15 gallons worth of weight, or if you're going into some of these remote tee boxes that maybe you only need 3 or 4 gallons, you don't have to fill it full every time.
Sure.
You come back out on the cart path to go to your next spot, you fill it up again and go on to the next spot.
And this year was the first year that you dove into the national scene, because you had a booth at GIS this year, right?
Yes, I did. Yep.
In San Diego, and somebody from the East Coast noticed it and said, "Somebody's finally built this for me." Right?
Yeah, that was a kind of an aha moment. That was something that kind of further justifies that what we're doing is beneficial.
Yeah.
We had people. We took that sprayer down there to our booth in San Diego, and and had somebody come up and say, "I've been asking for this, or I had been my whole career, and I'm retired now, and now finally something."
And I'm retired now.
But it's just one of those custom deals. It's not a fit for every course. It's not a fit for every customer, but in those courses that have those needs and they have some of those tighter areas, we can do that same level of technology and accuracy.
You think you'll build another one?
Oh, I'd build another one in a heartbeat.
But do you think there'll be a demand?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there'll be some other people that are going to notice it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're already over an hour, right? I told you it would go fast. So this one's abstract, but my last question for you is, what is the most interesting project you've been involved with Ag Enterprise? Probably that one, or that was one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of them. And it's always the next one.
Yeah.
So it's one of the hardest questions that you've asked me, honestly.
Okay.
Because everything we do is custom, or
Sure.
most everything we do. Our hook lift trucks, so we're a Palfinger roll-off dealer, so similar to like a garbage dumpster rolls off the back of a truck.
Okay.
We built spray units for those. We've come up with an option to do a flusher, like road washing truck,
Mm-hmm.
that people hadn't done in the way that we're doing it before. That was a really fun project.
Hmm.
We did a Can-Am side-by-side sprayer that had a GPS computer on it for a spray unit for city parks department.
Oh, no
It
kidding.
has 4 direct inject chemical injection pumps on it. It has a dye injection unit on it for spraying when they're wanting to use dye. It has 2 different product tanks on it, one for using a hose reel, one for with the injection. It was everything we could physically put on all of the long frame Can-Am Defenders. It's on there. It's packed.
I think I saw pictures.
So that was really fun. That Sandstar from the golf and turf side, we did a 500-gallon tow behind sprayer on our Dakota material handling chassis.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sean. With a 30-foot boom on it.
Yeah.
And that's got that same Hawkeye technology on it. So
Okay.
just thinking outside the box on those. And then another one that's extremely unique is we were very, very involved in designing and providing the parts and technology for a sprayer for a logging forwarder.
Which is what?
It's basically kind of a skidder type thing where they're going out in the field,
Okay.
6-wheel unit, articulated, that's extreme terrain.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to use chemical injection because they didn't want to tank mix their 1,600-gallon tank, because when it rolls over, they want a 1,600-gallon.
Not if, but when.
The thing was posed to us that when it rolls over, not if.
Huh.
To my knowledge, it's been in the field for 5 years now. To my knowledge, they haven't rolled it yet.
Okay. But they're ready for it.
But yeah, they have provisions for it. But going into the areas where they can't aerially apply, and their only option was backpack cruise. And so going out there as that project,
sure.
Not only did we have to come up with the chemical injection and the solutions along those lines, but they also had to keep their boom about 8 feet off the ground because of the stumpage.
Because of stumps and sure.
So coming up.
So they did use a boom and not a boomless.
Yes, it is solid boom because of the rocking.
Right.
With boomless, they wouldn't be able to get a consistent width.
Yeah.
So we came up with some drops with spray nozzles on them, and we had a ATV sprayer tied to a pallet on the forklift mast, running around in the yard here testing. And that's our, try it, see what we can.
So your team in the fabrication shop, they never know what they're going to do on a given day.
No,
it's got to be kind of exciting, but a little maddening at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting.
It's one of those things that keeps us fresh and keeps us going,
right,
but it's also one of those things that, sometimes you just need to take a breath and do something that you're familiar with.
For sure.
Just go down that path.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. This isn't obviously a marketing campaign or anything, but how would people find you? Because I know you've made an effort to be a little more maybe Western regional or national. How can we find you?
So our website is agenterprise.com.
Okay.
It's ag as in agriculture. It's AG Enterprise with an S, not a Z.com. Our phone number, 800-782-7786 is the direct line to our store. And if anybody has any questions or just wants to talk tech or just see where things are going, I'm always interested to see what people's interests are out there. We're on social media as well. Probably not as active as we should be in some applications, but
you're a little busy building things.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
But yeah, it's something that we're always willing to talk to people and see what opportunities are out there. And if nothing else, it's a learning experience for us, and hopefully it is for our customers as well.
Yeah. Well, as a longtime customer, I appreciate the time. It's been as fascinating as I hoped, and hope everybody enjoyed the conversation. If you got questions, reach out to Ryan. He's been a wealth of knowledge for me and for the industry. And thanks again for listening, and hopefully everybody gets something out of this.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet.